If you're thinking about getting into Oblivion, then this video is going to show you everything, and I really do mean everything, that you need to know as a new player. I've pulled together the most relevant content from my expansive Oblivion library to give you the ultimate beginner's guide. We're going to be covering character creation, race choices, birth signs, core systems, guilds, crafting, gold making, DLC content, and much, much more. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's go on this learning journey together. Oh, and this video includes content created across a number of years, so there will be a mix of both vanilla and remastered footage, but everything included should be relevant to the remastered version of the game. In this first section, I'm going to cover everything you need to know to pick the very best build for your playstyle, starting with race choice.
Why worry about which race you're going to pick, and why not just pick one that you think looks cool or, isn't a lizard? Well, in Oblivion, it actually has a significant impact on your stats, and certain races are significantly better for certain classes or playstyles, especially in the early game. Later in the game, these racial stat bonuses are less impactful, as every race can improve every skill and attribute to the maximum level. However, some races also possess something called greater powers, and as well as this, they have some significantly impactful magic resistances, which are going to continue to impact your character throughout the game. We'll cover all of this in the video, so if you're interested, stay to the end. Now, rather than just listing the attributes and skill bonuses for each race in order and potentially boring you to death, I'm going to focus on which races are best for which role. Let's start with the most balanced race, which in my opinion is Dunmer, or Dark Elves. Why? Well, basically they have something to offer for all three major playstyles, as well as a generically useful greater power that can be utilised in a number of scenarios. Dunmer start the game with enhanced blunt, blade, marksman and destruction skills, which makes them your best bet if you want to try a bit of each major combat style early on. And by major combat style, I'm basically talking about archery, close combat, and offensive magic. They also have a bonus to athletics, which is useful really for any character, especially early on when you're particularly slow moving. They have a bonus to light armor, which gives them a bit of added survivability. And they also have a bonus to a second school of magic in mysticism. This offers a bit of further survivability in the form of absorb spells, as well as various other utilities.
In terms of their starting attributes, they get a bonus to speed, which, much like athletic skill, is useful for any character. However, they also get a reduction in willpower and personality in return.
Most races start Oblivion with some sort of resistance, and in the case of the Dunmer, this is a 75% resistance to fire, which, considering all the fire damage dealt with in Oblivion Gates, makes it a really good bonus for the main story quest in particular. It's also great if you want to play as a vampire, as one of the downsides of vampirism is actually a weakness to fire. On top of enhancements to skills, attributes and resistances, some races also have greater powers or additional racial benefits available to them. The Dunmer have a greater power called Ancestor Guardian, which is the ability to summon basically a ghost to fight alongside you for 60 seconds. Now, this can be really handy in a number of scenarios, including as a distraction while you escape, or just to give you that extra bit of damage to take down a more challenging enemy. It's worth noting that the Ancestor Guardian actually scales with the player level, so it maintains its usefulness throughout the game. Overall, the Dunmer or Dark Elves feel like a really solid all-rounder, and you can't go too far wrong picking this race. Moving on to some more focused builds, and starting with the Warrior playstyle. One race that absolutely excels for warrior builds is the Red Guards. They have a bonus to blade, blunt, and both light and heavy armor, making them ideally suited to getting up close and personal with your enemies. Red Guards also receive a bonus to athletics, and again, this is just generically useful for running around in the early game, and particularly so if you're using heavy armor. They also have a 75% resistance to both disease and poison, making them even more durable in certain encounters.
Red Guards start with plus 10 strength and endurance, but also get a minus 10 to intelligence, willpower and personality.
In terms of their greater power, the Red Guards have Adrenaline Rush, which turns them into absolute monsters for 60 seconds. It fortifies their strength, endurance, agility and speed by 50 points, as well as increasing their health by 25 points. This power can only be used once a day, which is the case for all greater powers, but it can be really helpful when you need it. All in all, it's hard to find a better warrior than a Red Guard. That being said, Orcs certainly give Red Guards a run for their money. They have enhanced starting skills in blunt weapons, heavy armor and blocking, as well as armorer and hand-to-hand. This, combined with their plus 10 and plus 5 strength attributes at the start of the game, and a 25% resist to all magic, makes them consistently tanky in all scenarios.
Additionally, orcs receive a plus 10 increase to their willpower attribute, but they receive minus attribute points in intelligence, speed, personality, and agility.
In terms of their greater power, orcs possess the Berserk ability, which gives a 60-second boost to fatigue, health, and stamina, which is really going to help you through those especially tough encounters. You get 200 fatigue points to help you keep swinging and blocking for longer, 50 points in strength which are going to increase your damage, and 20 points in health to give you that extra bit of survivability. As with all greater powers, it can only be used once a day, and there is actually a downside in that your agility is drained by 100 points whilst you're using it, which increases the likelihood that you might get staggered by the enemy. Overall though, orcs are an exceptional choice for warrior playstyles. Moving on to magic builds, and once again you have two contenders for the top spot. Let's start with the Ultima, or High Elves. The Ultima gain a starting bonus to 5 different schools of magic: Alteration, Destruction, Mysticism, Illusion, and Conjuration, as well as a bonus to Alchemy.
They also start with a plus 10 bonus to their intelligence attribute, making them a particularly powerful magic user from the very beginning of the game. On the negative side, they receive minus points in strength and speed, which isn't too much of a trade-off.
On top of the base skills and attributes, the Ultima also possess a very powerful inbuilt Fortify Magicka effect. This gives them a 100 point to their Magicka, allowing them to cast a greater number of spells before running out of Magicka. In terms of resistances, they have a 75% resist to poison, giving them added survivability in certain scenarios. However, they are overall one of the more delicate races, and this is due to the fact that they're the only race to actually have a weakness to certain types of magic. Specifically, they have a 25% weakness to fire, frost, and shock damage. Ultima sadly don't have a greater power, which I'm sure is a source of great embarrassment for them. But yeah, overall they're a very strong choice for a magic build, and potentially the best in the game.
When it comes to magic builds, the High Elves do have a competitor with the Bretons.
And especially if you're thinking about defensive magic builds. Bretons start the game with enhanced skills in Mysticism, Restoration, Conjuration, Alteration, and Illusion. So while the absence of Destruction means they're not as powerful offensively in the early game as Ultima mages, they have a solid grounding in most schools of magic. And again, much like the Ultima, they actually receive a bonus to Alchemy as well.
They receive a plus 10 boost to intelligence and willpower, but also negative stats in agility, speed, and endurance.
The Bretons also receive the Fortify Magicka buff that we talked about with the Ultima, though it's not quite as powerful as the Ultima version, and this one only offers plus 50 Magicka. However, it's still incredibly useful for a magic-focused character. The Bretons and the Ultima really start to deviate when it comes to their defensive abilities. Bretons actually receive a whopping 50% overall magic resistance, making them incredibly tanky against enemy spellcasters. On top of this, they actually do get a greater power called Dragon Skin, and Dragon Skin offers significant protection against physical damage for 60 seconds. Again, it can only be used once a day, but it can really get you out of some pretty tricky situations. Overall, I feel like this makes Bretons more diverse than the Ultima. Technically, the Ultima are better for pure output because they have that bigger Magicka pool, so you take the decision based on whether you want a more defensive playstyle or not. Moving on to stealth builds, which are in my mind a little less clear-cut than combat and magic builds, which are really heavily influenced by the resistances and greater powers available that are going to offer significant longer-term benefits. In stealth builds, you could basically take it in two directions. You could focus on the early game stats, particularly sneak, security, blade, and marksman, or you might want to ignore the initial stats entirely and go for the stronger, longer-term greater powers and resistances, at which point you might even start looking to orcs and redguards, neither of which are really traditionally associated with stealth builds, but both have very strong greater powers in combat situations. However, there is one particular race in my mind that offers both short and long-term benefits in the stealth category, and that is the Khajiit. Khajiit start with bonuses to all of the major stealth-based skills outside of marksman, and you can see my second recommendation for that. They begin the game with a bonus to sneak, security, blade, light armor, athletics, and acrobatics, ideal for a stealth build. Aside from that, they also have increased ability in hand-to-hand.
In terms of their attributes, they are once again pretty suited to stealth builds with a plus 10 bonus to agility. In terms of negative attributes, they take a hit to willpower and endurance.
When it comes to resistances, the Khajiit are one of the only two races that don't actually have any. However, they do get a greater power called Eye of Fear. And what this does is it demoralises an enemy up to level 25 for 30 seconds. And as it's a greater power, it can only be used once a day. Probably more interestingly, they also possess a lesser power called Eye of Night that allows them to see in the dark for 30 seconds. And this one comes in pretty handy when you're sneaking around at night as either a thief or an assassin. And it's not limited to once per day because it's not a greater power. This combination of skills, attributes, and the Eye of Night ability make Khajiit a very strong overall choice for a stealth character. My second stealth recommendation feels a bit more like an honourable mention in relation to ranged stealth builds, and more specifically for people who want to play a stealth archer who's as strong as possible from the very beginning without worrying about their longer term ability. If that's the case for you, then the best choice in this scenario is the Bosmer. My primary reason for this recommendation is the fact that the Bosmer are the only race who start with bonuses to both sneak and marksman skills. This makes them instantly the strongest stealth archers in the early game. In addition to this, they benefit from improved acrobatics and light armor, both of which have a value to a stealth build, as well as alchemy and alteration, both offering some broader utility.
The Bosmer gain plus 10 agility and speed in terms of their starting attributes, giving them a very strong initial edge in the stealth category. In terms of negative stats, they're penalised on strength and willpower as well as personality.
The Bosmer also have a 75 resistance to disease, giving them a bit of added survivability in certain scenarios. However, the Bosmer do have one pretty significant long-term weakness, and that's their very lackluster greater power. The Beast Tongue power allows them to command a creature once per day for 60 seconds, which sounds great, but sadly it only works on creatures up to level 5 and it doesn't scale. And while it's strong in the early game, it quickly becomes pretty useless. So overall, the Bosmer are a great choice for Stealth Archer early in the game, but later on the benefits start to erode pretty quickly. Whether you pick them for your Stealth Archer build really depends on what you value more. As we moved into the final section, I've really tried to avoid calling the remaining races the worst races. Instead, I've gone for niche builds in order to try and be a bit more diplomatic. I think this is fair because in theory there are some things they're better at. However, those things are more secondary to the core combat of the game, in my opinion. The reality is, for the 3 core playstyles that we've focused on in this video, they're just weaker than the other options. Let's start with the Argonians, who are a decent stealth race. They're just not as good as the Khajiit in the longer term. They start with a bonus to Athletics, Security and Blade, all of which are valuable stealth skills. And they also offer some diversity due to the additional bonuses that they get in Alchemy, Hand-to-Hand, Illusion and Mysticism.
Argonian starting attributes lean mostly towards stealth, with plus 10 to both agility and speed, with their negative points going into endurance, personality and willpower.
In terms of resistances, Argonians are actually pretty strong in certain scenarios, as they've got a 75% resistance to disease, and they actually have total immunity to poison damage. Sadly, Argonians are another race who don't possess a greater power, though they can breathe underwater as a small consolation, but to be honest that doesn't have a huge impact on gameplay, especially compared to some of the other powers available. Like I said, there's nothing really wrong with Argonians, unless you don't like lizards for some reason, but there are just better choices in all categories. It's a similar story for the Nords. They're perfectly decent warriors, they're just not as strong as the Red Guards or the Orcs. They start with solid warrior-based skills enhancements including Blade, Blunt, Heavy Armour and Block, as well as some added survivability from increased skills in Restoration and some bonus utility from Armourer.
They also benefit from a strong initial attribute bonus in the form of plus 10 to strength and endurance, with negative attributes consisting of minus intelligence, personality and willpower.
Unsurprisingly, Nords have a resistance to frost at 50% and they benefit from 2 greater powers. The first is Nordic Frost, which is basically just a frost-based damage ability, and the second is Woad, a 30% shield that lasts for 60 seconds. Again, in summary, perfectly good, just not as good as the other warrior races. Finally, we arrive at the Imperials, apparently a bit of a jack of all trades and arguably the master of one, though it's not really one that I can get too excited about. Imperials start with bonuses to Mercantile and Speechcraft, as well as a bonus to Heavy Armour and minor bonuses to Blade, Blunt and Hand-to-Hand.
On top of this, they gain a starting bonus of plus 10 to their personality attribute, with them taking a hit to agility and willpower on the negative side.
which kind of makes their niche haggling and persuading NPCs, which to be honest is pretty unexciting unless you're going for a very, very particular playstyle. They're also the second race in the game that don't have any resistances, so there's not really any benefit to be had there either. They do have two greater powers like the Nords, but even one of those is focused on NPC interaction. The Voice of the Emperor power basically improves your disposition with the NPC you cast it on for 30 seconds by effectively charming them. And the second power is called the Star of the West, and that allows you to absorb 100 points of fatigue from an enemy, which to be fair can actually be pretty useful in some combat situations where you're running low on fatigue and you might be at risk of dying because you can't block, for example. However, overall I really can't see a scenario in which I would pick or recommend Imperials over the other options. Sorry Imperials.
Let's move on to the next major character build decision that you're going to be asked to make during the tutorial, and that's your character's birth sign. Before we get into the specific birth signs, you're probably wondering why birth signs are even important in the first place. Well, the main reason is that they offer a powerful boost to your character that can make things much smoother, especially in the early stages of the game. For example, the warrior birth sign combined with the Redguard race gives an enormous boost to your strength and endurance, making your warrior build far stronger out of the gate than if you'd used, for example, the apprentice birth sign and the Ultima race. In this particular example, this isn't just a small difference, it's massive. It's going to be immediately noticeable, especially in the early stages of the game, and it's arguably essential if you want to play at higher difficulty settings. So with that in mind, let's start by covering the birth signs that you're going to want to avoid. First on this list is the Tower, which is probably the worst birth sign in the game. It allows you to open one average difficulty lock per day, as well as providing a minor damage reflection spell that can also only be used once per day. Now, average locks are trivially easy to pick, and you're likely to come across multiple locks per day, so it really doesn't feel like much of a convenience feature to instantly unlock one. And 5% damage reflection for 120 seconds is so minor that it barely feels like you've used it. Honestly, I really can't see any reason to pick the Tower over the other birth signs, and that even includes the other bad ones. Speaking of which, the Serpent is another birth sign that you should probably look to avoid. It offers you a spell that simultaneously puts a minor damage over time effect on the enemy, as well as curing you of poison and dispelling any magic effects on you. This spell can only be cast once per day, and it's going to cost you 100 fatigue. It's not that it's necessarily a bad spell, but it's very low impact for something you can only use once per day, especially given that it's the only benefit you get for picking the Serpent birth sign. If it was spammable, maybe the Serpent would make its way into the situational or niche build category, but it isn't, so it can't really be justified as anything but one of the worst choices available. Next up we have the Shadow, which allows you to cast a spell once per day that gives you 60 seconds of invisibility. On paper, this doesn't sound bad at all. There are a wide range of use cases in which invisibility can be useful. These range from making stealth missions trivial to escaping particularly dicey combat situations. However, there's an item you can acquire pretty early on in the game called the Joan Stone, if that's how it's even pronounced. But anyway, this stone gives you a greater power that actually offers 120 seconds of invisibility, as well as a number of other benefits. This makes the Shadow pretty much redundant unless you feel you need a full 3 minutes of invisibility for some reason. So while it's not a bad power, basically it's always going to be better to take the benefits of another birth sign and use the stone to deal with your invisibility needs. Moving on to the Ritual, which in my opinion probably gets the title of best of the worst. Firstly, it offers you the ability to turn undead, making them run away from you for 30 seconds, and that can be used multiple times per day. This could potentially be useful at harder difficulties for certain undead heavy areas such as Sancretor. Secondly, the Ritual also offers a 200 point heal that can be used once per day, which is a very strong heal and it can get you out of certain death situations. So whilst the Ritual certainly isn't in the same sort of category as the Tower for just being flat out bad, I just can't see any reason to pick it over the other choices available. Moving on to what can be considered the best birth signs for the vast majority of situations, and therefore the best choices for the majority of players. First up in this category is the Atronach.
An overall solid Birthsign that trades out your standard magicka regeneration for an additional 150 points of overall magicka, as well as a 50% chance to absorb the magicka of any spell cast on you. Not only topping up your magicka, but also completely negating the damaging effects of that spell. This makes the Atronach incredibly powerful for going up against enemy spellcasters. It does become weaker against non-spellcasting enemies though if you're using a spellcasting build yourself, as your magicka regen is going to be very weak. That being said, you still have a larger magicka pool due to the 150 point bonus, and this will allow you to cast a decent number of spells before running dry. And you can also supplement this to some extent with potions. Overall, it's a top tier choice, and it's a particularly strong Birthsign for more defensive magicka based playstyles, rather than builds that spam destruction magic and go through mana extremely quickly. But we'll get on to some Birthsigns that work well for that playstyle too. Another very strong Birthsign is the Warrior, which provides a simple offering of a 10 point bonus to both your strength and endurance. Strength increases your maximum fatigue and carry capacity, as well as increasing your melee damage, and endurance increases your maximum fatigue and health, which makes strength and endurance two of the most powerful stats in the game. There isn't actually a huge amount to say on the Warrior aside from it just makes any melee build significantly more powerful from day one. It's useful in every situation, it doesn't require any active thought, you just select it for an instant power boost and play the game. As I mentioned in the introduction, combining the Warrior Birthsign with a race such as Redguard that gives similar bonuses will make a night and day difference to your character's power level from the moment you select them. The Thief is very similar to the Warrior in the sense that it simply provides a boost to your attributes, and in this case you gain 10 points to agility, speed and luck. Agility increases your maximum fatigue and your ranged weapon damage, as well as reducing your chance to be staggered in combat. Speed increases your movement speed and jump distance, and luck positively modifies the values of most skills in the game. This combination makes the Thief Birthsign an obvious choice for the famous stealth archer build. If you pair the Thief with a race choice such as Dunmer or Bosmer, this is going to make for an incredibly strong stealth archer right out of the gate. Next up we have the Mage, potentially the most simple Birthsign of all. It basically just increases your magicka pool by 50 points, allowing you to cast more spells before you run out of magicka, making the Mage a solid choice for anyone wanting to play as any form of spellcaster. The obvious question is probably why would you bother with this when the Atronach actually gives you 150 points of additional magicka? Well, it's because there's no downside to the Mage. You simply get a decent chunk of extra magicka without losing your magicka regeneration, or having to rely on being hit by spells to get any kind of regen at all. It's just a safe and solid choice for any magic based build. Your alternative as a spellcaster for a simple but effective Birthsign is the Lady, which much like the Warrior and Thief offers a flat boost to some of your attributes. In the case of the Lady, you get plus 10 willpower and endurance. Willpower increases your maximum fatigue as well as your magicka regen, and endurance increases your maximum fatigue and health. Basically, if you're planning to end fights quickly, the Mage is a better choice for a bigger magicka pool. But if you're playing at higher difficulties and expect fights to last longer, then the Lady may be a better option due to the enhanced magicka regen. Either Birthsign is solid for a no-fuss spellcaster build. However, if you want to try something that's a little more high risk, high reward, then you could also consider the Apprentice, which we'll get onto shortly.
And finally, in the best Birthsign section is the Lord, which I used to include in the niche build section because it wasn't a particularly good Birthsign, but, and I didn't notice this, and I apologise to everyone because I uploaded a video with incorrect information in it and people called me out, rightly so. The Lord is the one Birthsign that's actually changed. I just missed it because I was so tired last night when I made the video. The Lord now offers increased armor rating, increased by 15, and it offers 15% magic resistance, which makes it now a really strong choice for pretty much any build where you want to have a bit more survivability. So it's actually really, really good for new players. So apologies for my oversight, and hopefully it makes more sense now.
So now that we've covered the best Birthsigns for most situations, let's very quickly look at some of the more interesting situational choices. Let's start with the Lover, which overall is a pretty lackluster Birthsign as all it gives is a single spell that paralyzes an enemy for 10 seconds. However, it just about scrapes its way into the niche Birthsigns rather than the worst Birthsigns, as paralysing a strong enemy for 10 seconds can trivialise a fight, which can be particularly useful at higher difficulty settings. However, overall I'd still consider the Lover to be one of the weaker Birthsigns. The Steed is similar. It offers a 20-point bonus to speed, which isn't particularly relevant for most playthroughs, especially given that any character can easily increase their speed by literally just running around and gaining athletic skill. However, it does have a niche in speedrunning, so I can't really put it in the worst Birthsign section when it's consistently used in record-breaking speedruns. But yeah, it's not particularly relevant to 99.9% of players. Last but not least, we have the Apprentice. The Apprentice Birthsign offers a 100-point boost to your Magicka. This gives it a larger overall Magicka pool than the Mage, and while it's smaller than the Atronach's 150-point boost, you don't have to take the substantial downside of losing your Magicka regen, and therefore inevitably running out of Magicka during longer fights at high difficulty, even when supplementing with mana potions. This balance actually makes the Apprentice the best overall Birthsign for spell damage output. However, it does come with a massive downside of a 100% weakness to magic. Because of this, it's definitely not one for beginners, on the basis that you're likely going to get clapped against spellcasters if you haven't put other mitigations in place. However, it is a fun choice for a glass cannon build, and therefore it occupies a strong niche for more experienced players.
Now, the final choice you'll need to make when it comes to your character's build is which class you're going to play. So let's take a quick look at how classes work in the remastered version of the game and how they drive the leveling system. But just before we do, did you know that your browsing history, messages, and personal data are constantly being tracked by your internet provider, marketers, and even government agencies? If you care about your privacy, the easiest way to protect it is with a VPN, and NordVPN makes it effortless. With just one click, NordVPN encrypts your connection so that no one can see what you're doing online. Not your ISP, not advertisers, not anyone. It runs quietly in the background while you game, so you won't notice any slowdown, and you can even maintain your home location when traveling to retain access to region-locked games and servers, and of course all of your other media. So if you want to stay safe online, follow the link in the description down below. You'll get a discount on NordVPN and a 30-day money-back guarantee. It's no risk or reward, so why not give NordVPN a try today? Anyway, as I was saying, after picking your race and birth sign, next up you're going to be asked to pick your class. The NPC will have a guess, but is unlikely to bear any relevance to what you actually want to do. Basically, there are 3 components to your class choice. Firstly, each class is aligned to one of the game's 3 major specializations. Each of these specializations governs 7 of the game's 21 skills, and you'll gain +5 to each of those 7 skills depending on which specialization you select, as well as those skills leveling faster than the rest. Secondly, each class has 2 favoured attributes, which simply means that you'll start with +5 to each of these attributes. Long term it isn't massive, but it can feel quite impactful early on, especially if you align it with your birth sign. For example, the Thief birth sign aligns nicely with the Thief class, as both of these choices grant a bonus to agility and speed. The third and final component of your class is your major skills. Basically, every class will get 7 major skills, and in addition to this, all classes have access to every remaining skill as a minor skill. This means that whatever character you make, you'll have access to every skill in the game. Your major skills will be assigned based on the predefined class you pick, or you can pick them yourself by creating a custom class. You'll gain a +20 starting bonus to each of these skills, and they'll level significantly faster, so think carefully when you select them. Now, whether you're a new or returning player, you may have heard about Oblivion's painful leveling system and the concept of efficient leveling. Well, I have good news for you, that's not a thing anymore. The clunky old leveling system that basically forced you to progress your skills in a very unnatural way has been stripped out almost entirely. The way leveling works now is very simple. You gain experience in your skills by using them, and then every time you gain a level in a skill, you also get given some experience towards your overall character level. Then, when you level up, you'll be given 12 points to spend across 3 different attributes. It's as simple as that, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a massive breath of fresh air. And just to be very clear on this, in the remaster you gain character experience from leveling up all skills, not just major skills as was the case in the original. So unlike in the original, minor skills will count towards your character level, they just offer a lower rate of experience than your major skills. Okay, so at this point you've got a solid build and you know how character progression works. But now what? How do you even get started on deciding what to do first in this expansive open world? Well, you can't go wrong with joining one of Oblivion's famous guilds and progressing their storylines. So in this section, I'm going to show you how to join every faction in the game, as well as covering the benefits of each.
We're going to cover how to join the Fighters Guild, the Thieves Guild, and the Mages Guild, as well as the Dark Brotherhood and the Arena. Let's start with the three easy ones, so the Fighters Guild, the Mages Guild, and the Arena. The reason they're easy is because they're basically just conversations that need to happen in certain places. For the Fighters Guild, you can join in one of 3 cities, and these are Anvil, Chainhull, or Coral. I think that's how you pronounce it. We're going to pick Anvil for the purposes of this video. So portal over to the gate at Anvil, you can see here on the map. You need to head over to this building that's going to be pretty obvious because it has red banners on it that have a little sword. And then this is the logo of the Fighters Guild. Then you simply need to walk in and ask a guy called Azan to join. Job done. The only thing that's going to stop you joining it is if you have infamy of 100 or more. So if you're planning on being a naughty character, then probably join the Fighters Guild early in the game rather than later on. And then once you've joined, you can pretty much immediately just start doing quests. We can then repeat the same thing for the Mages Guild. You literally go next door. Though again, you can join the Mages Guild in any city that has one, I believe. And I believe pretty much every city has a Mages Guild apart from the Imperial City and Kvatch. Again, you'll see banners on the building that represent the Mages Guild, and again, you just walk in and speak to someone and you can join. The only thing that will stop you joining in this circumstance is if you have a bounty on you, basically a criminal record. So if you do have a bounty, you need to clear it before you can join the Mages Guild. And much the same as the Fighters Guild, as soon as you've done this, you can start doing the Mages Guild campaign and do the various quests. For the Arena, it's similar again, basically just a single conversation. You just need to go to the Arena district of the Imperial City, which you can see here on the map. You speak to a guy called Owen, who's the Blade Master in the Bloodworks. He'll make fun of you a bit and say that you're probably going to not survive the arena, but he will eventually, at the end of the conversation, give you some light or heavy armor and allow you to compete in your first fight. Bear in mind, fights run from 9 AM till I think 9 PM, so you need to be there during the day to fight essentially. And that's it, you're then in the arena and you can start climbing through the ranks by defeating different opponents. Then it gets a bit more interesting when we get to the Thieves Guild. There are actually a few different ways to join, or at least to trigger the quest that allows you to join. One of the ways is you could simply just steal something and allow the guards to catch you, and then when they do, opt to be sent to prison. Following this, you'll be approached by a representative of the Thieves Guild, who will in turn ask you to attend a secret meeting at the Garden of Deriloth. I personally wouldn't recommend doing it this way, as there are certain penalties for going to prison. A much easier way, I think, is just to go over to the Imperial City waterfront, you see here on the map. Then when you arrive, you need to read one of the posters on the wall that talk about the Grey Fox. These are actually all over the place, you don't have to read it here, but if you haven't read one already, this is as good a place as any to read one. Once you've read the poster, you're going to trigger that same event where you need to meet in the Garden of Deriloth, the one that I mentioned just previously. So to do that, you need to head over to the garden, you can see it here on the map. Then you need to wait until midnight for 3 NPCs to arrive. The important one of these NPCs is a guy called Armand Christophe. The first thing you're going to need to do is raise his disposition to 50 by using the little persuasion wheel thing. And once you do that, he's going to actually allow you to get the quest to join the Thieves Guild. He challenges you to steal a diary from a home in the Temple District. I think it's the Temple District. I'll show it on the map anyway. And you have to compete against the other thieves who are trying to join. To complete the quest, you're going to either have to beat Mephrodel to stealing the diary, or if she beats you to stealing it, then you're going to have to in turn steal it from her. I'd just recommend getting there before she does, which is pretty easy to do. The first thing you need to do is run over and speak to this beggar and give him 5 coins. Once you do, he's going to give you the location of the diary, or the location of the house at least. Then run over to the house, pick the lock, and go straight into this cupboard and grab the diary. You shouldn't really have any problem beating Mephrodel because she's actually going to mess around for a while before she goes and grabs the diary, and you should have it by then. Once you've done this, you just need to return to the garden. He should still be there if you've been fast enough, otherwise you'll have to wait again till midnight. And as your reward, you're going to be inducted as a member of the Thieves Guild. You're then going to need to steal goods and sell them to a fence in order to unlock quests. And the first quest is unlocked by selling 50 gold's worth of stolen items to Ongar in Bruma. The final one is the Dark Brotherhood, and this probably has the coolest starting quest, and you might even just stumble upon it, if you're a murderer that is. Basically, you need to kill an innocent in cold blood in order to get the attention of the Dark Brotherhood. Now I'd recommend killing an NPC with no significance for other quests, otherwise you might end up causing yourself some problems. There's a Khajiit called Shrafad, I can't pronounce it, there's an S in there somewhere, but anyway he's in the Imperial City Talos district and that would be a good option. You can see here on the map where the district is. Or you can go and kill one of the inhabitants of the Bravil Skooma Den, and I'll show that on the map as well. These NPCs have no significance and it's not going to be a problem if you kill them. Another option is to kill a guard, like I did, actually by mistake on a recent playthrough, but it's a 1,000 gold bounty if you do, which in the early game is really going to sting. So I wouldn't recommend doing it that way, like I did, by mistake. Once you've done the deed, you need to find a bed and rest. You can just go and book in at any inn, and that'll do the job. When you wake up, you're going to be confronted by Lucien Lachance. He's going to give you the Blade of Woe and request that you murder a man called Rufio. It is worth noting, however, that you don't actually have to kill him with this blade, you can kill him with any weapon. Here I just shoot him with the bow. Actually, I missed my first shot at point blank range, which is pretty embarrassing, but there you go, I left that in. After you kill him, you just need to go to sleep again, and actually you can simply get a bed in the Inn of Ill Omen, which is where you've just killed Rufio, so you're sleeping at the scene of the crime like a truly remorseless killer. Upon waking, Lucien's going to appear again and welcome you to the Dark Brotherhood. He's going to send you to Sheyendell to the Dark Brotherhood HQ, where one of the first things you're going to get is some really nice light armor that's actually really great for sneaky assassin type builds. And that's pretty much it. Take these steps and you'll be a member of all 3 guilds as well as the Arena and the Dark Brotherhood.
Now if you want to build a truly overpowered character in Oblivion, then there are 3 features that you're going to want to make a special effort with. And these are Enchanting, Alchemy and Spellmaking. And in this next section, we're going to explore them in far greater detail. And just a heads up, as we progress further into this very long video, as this is a mega compilation of my guides, there may be some slightly out of context plugs of other videos, so apologies for that. You'll find that the majority of videos that I link to will actually form part of this Ultimate Beginner's Guide anyway, though please do feel free to explore my channel as there are many videos that I haven't included. Anyway, let's get into these incredibly overpowered features, starting with Alchemy.
So why bother with Alchemy in the first place? Well, the potions provided can actually have a massive impact on gameplay, providing a whole range of buffs to your character as well as substantial health and magicka restoration. And there's even some quite powerful damaging effects that can be used on your enemies. This is all particularly useful if you want to play at the higher difficulty levels, where your character's performance really starts to matter. So let's start with how to actually make potions. It's a pretty simple process. You just need to locate a pestle and mortar, which can actually be done as early as the tutorial in the Imperial Sewers, and then you just need to right click it in your inventory. This will open up the alchemy window. You can then select ingredients that you wish to combine in order to make a potion.
As a minimum, you must select 2 ingredients that share this same property in order to create a potion. Ingredients can have up to 4 properties, but as a low-level alchemist, you'll only be able to see one of them. More on that later. The remaster has actually added a really helpful filter that makes finding ingredients that share properties a lot easier, as you can see here.
Before you commit to creating the potion, you'll be given a preview of the effects of that potion, which will be based on the ingredients that you're using. To discover different potions, you could just experiment with the ingredients yourself and work out which combinations will yield which potions. Or you could alternatively look at an alchemy calculator, such as the one provided by UESP, the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages. This calculator is going to give you the outcome of any combination of ingredients. To find it, you can just Google UESP alchemy calculator, and I'm pretty sure there's probably other calculators out there as well. Of course, all potions are not created equal, and you can actually increase the strength effects, duration effects, and the gold value of the potions themselves. And this can be done in 2 key ways. Firstly, you can use special apparatus, and secondly, you can increase your alchemy skill level. Let's take a look at both, starting with the apparatus. Oh, and do let me know in the comments how many Americans I just triggered by using the British pronunciation of apparatus. In total, there are 4 different pieces of apparatus or apparatus in-game that can enhance your alchemy. We actually already mentioned the first one, the mortar and pestle, which as well as being the basic apparatus that allows you to use alchemy at all, it also offers an increase to your alchemy skill. Secondly, you have the retort, which you can add to increase the magnitude of all positive effects and the durations of every potion you create. Thirdly, you have the calcinator, which increases the magnitude and duration of all positive and negative effects of the potions you create. And finally, you can add an alembic, which decreases the magnitude and duration of all negative effects. Using multiple apparatus is very simple, you just have to have them in your inventory, and you'll know if they're working because you'll see them appear in the alchemy window when you open it. It's also worth noting that all 4 pieces of equipment can be used together to combine their effects. Adding both a retort and calcinator is going to maximise the strength and duration of all positive effects, and adding an alembic will allow you to reduce the negative effects that have been further enhanced by the calcinator. The degree to which any apparatus improves your potions depends on its level. There are actually 5 different levels of apparatus that you can either purchase from a vendor or find when you're out exploring, for example, in a dungeon. These levels are Novice, Apprentice, Journeyman, Expert, and Master. It's actually the level of your character, not the level of your alchemy skill, that's going to dictate the level of apparatus available to you from both vendors and via exploration. To get yourself started, as we already mentioned, you can actually loot a Novice Pestle and Mortar in the sewers during the tutorial, and you can very quickly expand to having a full set of Novice apparatus by going to Cloud Ruler Temple and becoming a member of the Blades. Once you've joined the Blades, you'll be able to freely loot the equipment found in Cloud Ruler Temple, or alternatively, you could just steal it. Don't get caught though. Once again, higher level equipment won't only improve the strength and duration of potions, it's also going to allow you to make more gold when selling potions, so keep that in mind. However, to make the most powerful potions, you can't rely on apparatus alone. You're also going to need to level up your alchemy skill. And how do you level up your alchemy skill? Well, it's pretty simple really, and fairly obvious. You need to make potions. Every time you do, you're going to gain some experience in your alchemy skill. Additionally, you can also eat ingredients for a smaller experience boost to your alchemy skill. And this also has the benefit of providing buffs to your character that are going to differ depending on the non-food ingredient that you consume. As your alchemy skill increases, you'll work through the skill ranks of Novice, Apprentice, Journeyman, Expert and Master, and as you do so you'll gain a number of benefits from your increased skill. You'll be able to identify more effects from your ingredients, you'll be able to produce stronger potions with longer durations, and you'll eventually be able to create potions with a lower number of ingredients. This can be a pretty good one for making gold. Again, you'll see I've put the levels on screen and you can pause to review if you want to. In order to level your alchemy, you are of course going to need a lot of ingredients, so I'll finish the video with some tips on where to find them. Ingredients can be found all over the world in Oblivion, and unlike in many other games, you won't only be using herbs for alchemy. You can throw all kinds of ingredients into your potions, including food. So a good general tip is just to loot every ingredient you come across in your travels. You'll come across food and other ingredients in dungeons, houses, the various guilds that you can join, just about everywhere to be honest. Just grab everything you can find and ideally go and store it all in a player house if you're not going to use it immediately, as otherwise it's going to weigh you down. You can check out my player housing video for more information on how to get hold of a cheap house with some storage. Just looting everything you come across is going to give you a really natural way to level alchemy whilst just exploring the world and completing quests as normal. However, if you really want to make a special trip to gather as many ingredients as you can, then the best place to go is farms. There are a number of farms that you can come across in the game. For example, I'm currently in one that's just to the west of Skingrad, and they're absolutely packed with ingredients that can give you a significant boost to your alchemy leveling. There's also a whole load of food that is available to you inside of player houses, and even in one case, in the house in Skingrad, you can get your maid to create food for you, basically giving you an unlimited source. And that's pretty much it.
Next up, Enchanting.
Why bother with enchanting at all? Well, basically it's going to make your character more powerful, and significantly so in some cases. Your weapons are going to hit harder and apply special effects, and your armour and rings will offer you greater protection, as well as a wide range of other useful bonuses. All of which is going to come in really useful at higher difficulty levels where you need that extra edge. But how do you actually enchant an item? Well, there are 2 methods, and it's worth noting that each method offers different enchanting effects, so it's definitely worth using both. Let's start with the first method, Sigil Stones, as is the simplest of the 2. To obtain Sigil Stones, you're going to need to clear Oblivion Gates. They're the item right at the end of the Oblivion Gate, so it's a bit of an effort to get your hands on them. But remember, you're going to be completing a number of Oblivion Gates naturally to progress the main story, so you're going to obtain some Sigil Stones naturally as a consequence of that. There are 5 different levels of Sigil Stones available: Descendant, Subjacent, Latent, Ascendant and Transcendent, with higher level stones giving more powerful effects. In terms of the effects themselves, I'm not going to list them all here as there are actually 30 different stones, but it's important to know that each stone has 2 effects. One for if you use it to enchant a weapon, and the other for if you use it to enchant a piece of armour. For example, this sigil stone offers damage fatigue if you use it on your weapon, and fortify fatigue if you use it on your armour. Strictly speaking, you can't target specific effects, as it's random which stone you get at the end of an Oblivion gate. However, you can save the game just before picking the stone up and keep reloading until you get the effect you want. Not that you'd ever dream of doing something so degenerate, of course. To use a sigil stone to enchant an item, you simply need to click on the stone, select the item you wish to enchant, and then give it a name. It's worth noting here that sigil stones can only apply one effect, unlike the second method that we're going to cover, which can actually add multiple effects to weapons. However, the effects of sigil stones can be very powerful, especially at the higher levels, so don't discount them on that basis. The second method is to use enchanting altars, which does offer the benefit of not having to fight your way through an entire Oblivion gate. However, to access an altar you do need to be a member of the Mages Guild, as the enchanting altars are mostly all within the Arcane University. There is one exception to this, which is Frostcrag Spire. This is a DLC player house that you already own if you have the Game of the Year edition of Oblivion. It will cost you a bit of gold in upgrades before you can access the enchanting altar, however. You can check out my DLC video that's in the same playlist as this one for further details on how to get and upgrade Frostcrag Spire. Now, enchanting an item using an altar works a little bit differently to using sigil stones, so I'll walk you through the process step by step. First of all, you're going to need an item called a soul gem. Soul gems come in 5 standard varieties: petty, lesser, common, greater, and grand. You can buy them from various vendors as well as by looting or stealing them. There's a 6th variety called a black soul gem, and this can be used specifically to capture the soul of NPCs. And also there's an infinitely refillable grand level soul gem called Azura's Star. This is a really helpful item if you're doing a lot of enchanting, and you can get it by completing Azura's Daedric quest. I'm actually planning to put out a video on completing Oblivion Daedric quest in the near future, so if you're watching this video a few weeks after publishing, it's probably already on my channel and it'll be in this playlist. It's worth noting that all gems aside from Azura's Star are actually single-use items. Anyway, once you acquire an empty soul gem of any description, you need to trap a soul inside it. To do so, you're going to need to learn the Soul Trap spell, which requires you to be at least at apprentice level in mysticism, and for you to purchase the spell, which is available from vendors at any of the Mages Guild halls. Once you have the spell, you simply need to cast it on an enemy just before they die in order to trap their soul. For this to work, you need to make sure that you have an appropriate level empty soul gem in your inventory. Basically, the more powerful the enemy, the more powerful the soul. So it makes sense to always keep a number of each type of soul gem in your inventory if possible. If the soul gem you have is too small, it won't capture the soul. Also, if you capture a less powerful soul in a more powerful soul gem, it won't fill it to full capacity. You can see here how the gems I'm using are not filled to capacity, therefore I can't get the full potential out of the enchantment. The second thing you're going to need is an effect to apply to the item. Effects that can be used at the enchanting altar come primarily from the spells you've learned. There's a few other bits like racial abilities, but it's mostly coming from spells that you've learned. It's worth noting that you need to be powerful enough to actually use the spell in order to enchant it onto an item. For example, if you have a powerful fire spell that you've managed to learn, but you don't actually have the destruction skill to cast it, then you won't be able to enchant it onto an item either. Once you have your item, your filled soul gem, and the spell effect that you want to use, you're ready to enchant. To do so, you simply need to click on the altar, select the item you wish to enchant, select the soul gem that you wish to use. Again, remember soul gems are one use unless you're using Azura's Star, and the strength of the enchant is going to depend on the strength of the soul gem and how full that soul gem is. You then need to select the magical effects you want. And in the case of weapons, you may notice that unlike sigil stones, you're able to apply multiple effects using the enchanting altar. You then need to name your item, and finally you need to pay a fee in gold, which will increase for more powerful enchants. And then congratulations, you have your enchanted item. Actually using enchanted items is very simple. Weapon enchants will activate when you hit an enemy, and armor enchantments will basically just be permanently active. The most important thing you need to know is that weapon enchantments use up charges, and when you run out of charges, you'll need to top them up. Again, this isn't the case for armour and rings, the enchants on those never run out. When it comes to recharging your weapons, you have 3 options. Firstly, you can simply use more of your filled soul gems. It's cheap and effective, you can carry a whole bunch of filled gems with you as you travel, and you can even fill more gems on the go if you're holding a bunch of empties. If you're using multiple enchanted weapons in combat though, you're going to go through them pretty quickly, which is what makes the next method handy to have up your sleeve. You can also buy filled soul gems at a number of vendors, but the stock's limited and it's definitely a more expensive way to recharge your weapons. However, it can be useful from time to time when you're feeling lazy. The second method is to use Vala stones, which can be looted from Ayleid ruins. These stones will actually charge up every single enchanted item in your inventory when used, so they're pretty powerful. I'd suggest saving them for when you need to recharge during a dungeon or Oblivion Gate where the stakes are high and it might be difficult to leave to recharge your items if you run out of soul gems. The third option available is just to buy recharges at any Mages Guild guildhall. There's a vendor in each location who will allow you to do this. However, it's very expensive and unless you're basically loaded, it's probably not the best way to spend your hard-earned gold. And that's pretty much it.
Next up, spell making.
Why bother with spell making in the first place? Well, because custom spells are the most powerful spells available in the game, and by a long way. This can be especially relevant if you want to beat the game at higher difficulties. And it's not just damaging effects that you can create either, you can also create custom spells that massively enhance many other aspects of the game. In short, it's probably the most powerful feature in the entire game, and at times it can feel pretty busted, especially when used alongside enchanting. By the way, if you're interested in enchanting, then you can check out my enchanting guide that's in the same playlist as this video. So, how do you gain access to spell making in Oblivion? Basically, there are two methods. Firstly, you can do so by gaining access to the Mages Guild, and you don't need to complete the entire Mages Guild questline as I've heard some people say in the past. This is a common misunderstanding. You simply need to complete the 7 recommendation quests offered by the Mages Guild leaders at each of the Mages Guild halls. These guild halls can be found in Anvil, Bravil, Bruma, Shadenhull, Coral, Leowin and Skingrad, so basically all of the major cities. These are fairly short quests and you're likely going to want to do them anyway as part of a full playthrough. Once you have all of the recommendations, you can travel to the Arcane University in the Imperial City and speak to a guy named Raminus Polis in order to gain access to the Mages Guild. Once you have access, the spellmaking altars can be found in the Praxographical Centre at this location on the map. You can pause the video here if you need to note down the location before we move on. The second method's a bit faster, but you do need to meet a couple of requirements. Firstly, you need to have access to the Mages Tower DLC in order to unlock Frostcrag Spire. For some simple instructions on how to do so, you can see my DLC video that covers this topic. Again, it's in the same playlist as this video, and I'll also pop a card up on screen to give you an easy link to click. The second thing you're going to need is some gold, so that you can upgrade Frostcrag Spire to unlock the spell making altar. Again, this is covered in the video I just mentioned. Okay, so now that you have access to a spell making altar, let's look at how to actually make a custom spell. Firstly, you need to know some spells, as you can only craft custom spells from the spells that you've already learned. These spells can be learned from spell tomes that you can either find or purchase from vendors. The best place to start is the spell tome vendors at each Mages Guild. Depending on which race you pick, you'll also be able to use your racial abilities that come in the form of greater and lesser powers. If you want more details on that, see my Oblivion Races guide. I feel like I'm plugging a lot of other guides in this video, but they're all very relevant to what we're talking about. Again, that video is in the same playlist as this one, and I'll pop a card up on the screen. It's important to note that you need to actually be able to cast the spell in order to use it in spell making. In Oblivion, you can learn a spell that you don't actually have the ability to use, so check that you have the necessary skill level in the appropriate school of magic in order to be able to cast a spell before trying to use it to make a custom spell, else it's just not going to work. Another quirk of the system is that as long as you have the appropriate skill level to use the spell, you don't actually have to have enough magicka to be able to cast it. So you'll still be able to create the custom spell in this case. However, it's a pretty pointless endeavour, as once you've made the custom spell, you're going to have the same problem as you're not going to have enough magicka to actually use it. Once you have a few spells to experiment with, you can access the altar of spell making by simply clicking on it. Once you do so, the spell making window will pop up. This will allow you to select spells that you've already learned and combine them into a custom spell. You'll see the effects for each spell you add come up on the right side of the window. Now, there are a very large number of combinations, so clearly it makes no sense to try and list them in this video. But if you want to find the most effective custom spells, then Google is definitely your friend. One thing I will say here is that the order in which you add the spells actually makes a difference to the custom spell that you end up with. So if you want to be optimal, then it's worth experimenting, and it's certainly worth doing a little research for the specific spells you wish to create. Each time you add a spell, you'll notice a second screen pop up in which you can set the parameters of that spell. You may be tempted to max it all for the most powerful spell possible, but it's important to note that these parameters affect the gold cost of the spell, as well as the skill level and magicka required to cast it. Again, this is one that you're just going to need to experiment with. As mentioned previously, if you raise the skill level too high, it will be pretty obvious because it won't let you create the custom spell. However, you can very easily get caught out by the magicka costs, as it will allow you to make the spell even if you don't have enough magicka to actually cast it. Another important thing to know about custom spells is that the spell you create will be associated with a particular school of magic. This is dictated by the highest mana cost spell that you use to create the custom spell, so keep an eye out for this. For example, if you want your spell to be a destruction spell, then make sure the highest mana cost spell that you add to the custom spell is from the destruction school of magic. Once you've added all of the spells you wish to combine and adjusted their parameters, then you simply need to name your spell and click done. And congratulations, you now have your very own custom spell, and you can equip and use it like any other spell in the game. And that's pretty much it.
Of course, to fund your new enchanting and spell-making addictions, you're going to need to have a little gold behind you. So next up, I'm going to give you 5 techniques for making gold at a low level.
At high level, things are a little different, and you won't necessarily use all of these techniques, though you will probably still use some of them. But the whole point of this video is that you're not at that level yet, and you want to just start making some gold right now. I'll start off with the laziest one, which is basically just to join guilds and sell their stuff. Now, what do I mean by that? There are basically guilds in the game, you've probably seen them already, and in particular, the Fighters Guild and the Mages Guild allow you to join very easily just by going to the guild and having a conversation. Then once you've joined, everything within those buildings essentially becomes yours. So you can literally just go and pick up the items off the shelves. Some of them are fairly valuable, especially when you're very early on in the game. That gold can actually make quite a big difference. So you can just grab these items, and in some cases, as you can see here, you can literally sell it back to them in the same building. It's a bit ridiculous, but it's an insanely easy way to make some gold to get you started. Now, we're not talking thousands and thousands, but there's a few hundred gold in there easily, and it's just an extremely easy way to get it early on. You can also do this as part of the main quest when you join the Blades. So when you go to Cloud Ruler Temple, there's actually a bunch of stuff over there that you can just loot and then just go and vendor immediately afterwards. Number 2 requires a little more effort, but not a lot more effort to be honest. This is guild based again, but this time we're talking about the Thieves Guild. Once you join the Thieves Guild, and I've actually got a video that shows you how to join the Thieves Guild, if you want to see that, I'll link it in the description down below. But once you've joined, you're basically able to go around shops at night or people's houses at night, break in, steal their stuff, and then sell it to a fence. The fence is why you need to join the Thieves Guild, because that's how you offload the stolen goods. A good place to go is the Market District in the Imperial City, and the best things to steal are basically items that are low weight and high in value. So you're talking jewellery, potions, ingredients, books, spell tomes, that kind of thing. So look for those shops within the Market District. They're all over the place, they're pretty obvious. Have a look around at the different shops, and you can actually go in the day and have a look at the sort of weight to value ratio of the items before you go in at night to steal them. Again, it's not massive money, but it will get you a few hundred to a few thousand, depending on how far you take your crime spree. And that's going to be really useful early on, just don't get caught, obviously. The third thing you can do is head over to the arena, again in the Imperial City, and sign up to fight there. For every victory in the arena, you're given an amount of gold, and it starts at 50 gold per match, and it goes up to 500 gold per match. The matches do get progressively harder, so there's going to be a limit on how far you can go, depending on the current stats and gear that you have. But the good thing is these fights are literally spammable, so between the hours of 9 AM and 9 PM when the arena's open, you can just go in and just fight back to back and get that gold really quickly.
Number 4, you could join the Dark Brotherhood and do the quests there. Essentially, the Dark Brotherhood will give you assassination contracts, and when you fulfill them, you'll be rewarded with gold, or at least an item that can be exchanged for gold. And in my opinion, these are some of the best quests that the game has to offer anyway, so it's really no chore completing them. A bit like the Thieves Guild, joining the Dark Brotherhood does involve a number of different steps that aren't necessarily obvious, especially if you haven't played before. And again, I'll refer you to the video that I talked about earlier in which I talk about how to join the different guilds in Oblivion, including the Dark Brotherhood. Again, the video link will be in the description down below. There are also some collection quests that you could quite easily miss, or at least not see the monetary value of. Firstly, you have a quest called The Collector, which essentially gives you money for collecting Ayleid ruin. I think it's how it's pronounced, Ayleid ruins for a guy called Umbacano. Sorry about my pronunciation here. But the great thing about this is you actually have 10,000 gold worth of value for doing the entire quest chain. And the places you go to loot these different artifacts are going to offer gold anyway, because you're going to be killing monsters and looting treasure chests and whatnot. So you're going to get sort of additional passive income just by going to those places and completing the essentially dungeons or delves or whatever we call them in Elder Scrolls. The way this quest starts is you have to get your first Ayleid statue and go to an NPC, sell it. Once you do that, a messenger will turn up and give you a note that comes from this Umbacano guy, and it says go to speak to him, which you do, and then you can immediately basically start beginning collecting for him and getting, I think it's 500 gold per statue. It's a lot anyway. It amounts to 10,000 gold after you've done all of them. And much like the Dark Brotherhood quest, it's a fun way of getting gold anyway if you're going to be going to these delves and using your combat skills and exploring. You can't lose, really. Another one is that you can collect vampire dust for a guy called Roland Genseric. And this is for an organisation that's called the Order of Virtuous Blood. Basically, they'll give you 250 gold per vampire dust, which isn't particularly hard to get if you go to places where there are vampires. Just Google that, there are loads. Now, I don't want to give spoilers for the quest, but there are decision points that will impact how much gold you can make. So if you care about spoilers, I'd at least suggest saving before you start the quest. And if you don't care about spoilers, just Google the quest and it'll tell you exactly what you need to do to make the most gold. And last but not least, you have alchemy, which is arguably the best way of making money at any stage in the game. It's certainly extremely low effort and very efficient. You simply need to turn food into potions and then sell them to the vendor. The only things you need to do it are items that you're going to find for free on your adventures anyway. Again, Google's your friend when it comes to the ins and outs of alchemy. But in this case, you do literally just use the items that you're going to find for free very early in the game. A pestle and mortar is going to get you started, and you can add retorts, calcinators and alembics to improve the quality of the potions and then sell them for a bit more money. Remember the items that you saw me stealing from the Mages Guild? Some of those are the items that you need for alchemy, so maybe just keep a few of them for yourself rather than selling them all. And sorry, you're not stealing them, you're taking them for free because you're part of the Mages Guild. It's not our fault that they're idiots and they let us sell them straight back to them. A really good place to get your first batch of ingredients is outside Skingrad, the town. You can go to the one side, and I'll show on the map here, and grab all of the grapes from the Tamika and Cyril vineyards. And then you can go to the opposite side and grab a bunch of tomatoes from the tomato farm over there. Once you've gathered all those ingredients, which is literally the work of a few minutes, you can then combine them to make a whole bunch of fatigue potions and then sell them for several hundred gold. And the prices you can see on the screen now are for each individual potion, not for the whole stack. So early in the game, that actually adds up to quite a bit. And also the grapes and tomatoes do respawn every 3 days, so you can repeat this. You also find and can steal food from pretty much anywhere. And a really nice thing when you steal it and then turn it into a potion is that it no longer counts as stolen goods. So you don't even need to use a fence to recycle stolen food. It really is just such an easy and an efficient way to make money. Also, using alchemy to make money isn't even limited to the low levels. As you level your skills and get access to higher level reagents, you can actually make even more profit.
So that's how to get a few coins in your purse early on. Next up, I want to move on to some more miscellaneous features of the game, starting with one of the game's quirkier features, the ability to become a vampire.
So, how do you become a vampire in Oblivion, and what are the advantages and disadvantages to living the Dracula life? Well, there are a number of different ways to becoming a vampire. Number one, you can basically just go and fight some vampires and get the vampiric disease. Now, there are a number of different places where vampires spawn, but one where you can guarantee to find vampires is the Barren Cave, which I'll show on the map right now. You just need to let the vampire melee attack you until you contract the disease. You'll see it come up on my screen now. This might take a while, so take some health potions with you so they don't actually kill you before they give you the disease. You can see in my example, I definitely would have died if I didn't have health potions because it took a lot of swings for me to actually get it. But this is a pretty easy method. The second option is to go through a bunch of Dark Brotherhood quests and eventually get a quest called Darkness Eternal. You can see this chap is the one that gives it to you, but you're going to have to actually do a bunch of quests before he's going to offer it. I believe the final one before you get Darkness Eternal is called My Brother's Keeper. So this is a bit of a more long-winded way to do it, but at least you don't have to get a vampire swinging an axe at you, I suppose. And you might just be doing the Dark Brotherhood stuff anyway. I'd definitely recommend doing it. It's a lot of fun, actually. Then the third way is you can get it just simply by sleeping outdoors at night. So if you went to a bedroll or a bandit camp and went to sleep for at least an hour at a time during the night, there is a chance that a vampire will bite you in your sleep and you'll get it that way. I actually tested this to try and get it for the video and it just didn't happen, and I wasted about 3 nights worth of going in and out of sleep, so I wouldn't really recommend trying to do it that way. The easiest way is probably just to go to the Barren Cave and get hit by a vampire. It doesn't take long at all. Once you've contracted the disease, you need to then wait 3 days and then sleep as well. It's very important that you sleep at the end of the 3 days, otherwise you won't turn into a vampire. It'll just wait till you next go to sleep. You'll then wake up and you will see that you now have vampirism, and if you look under your abilities, you'll see that you have various enhancements and some penalties for being a vampire. There are 4 different stages of vampirism. You're currently in stage 1 if you've just woken up, and every 24 hours you go without feeding, and then subsequently you need to sleep as well. You'll go up to the next stage of vampirism. It'll be really obvious when it's happened because when you wake up after a day without feeding, you'll have had a dream. It'll be a little bit of text that comes up on the screen like this, and that means you've advanced the next stage of vampirism. So this is how you become a vampire, and this is how you progress in stages as a vampire. So what's actually the point of all of this? What are the benefits of being a vampire? Well, as a vampire, you get boost to certain stats. You get a 100% paralysis resist passive. You get some resistance to disease. You get resistance to normal weapon damage, and you get abilities for each stage. So at stage 1, you get Hunter's Sight, which gives you Night Eye, which is essentially see in the dark for 30 seconds, and it gives Detect Life within 100 feet for 30 seconds. Phase 2, you get Vampire Seduction, which is a charm ability that essentially charms someone for 20 seconds on touch. At stage 3, you get Reign of Terror, which is a silence that can be used at 20 foot, and it's for 60 seconds, which is significant. Then you have stage 4, which is Embrace of Shadows, which is really powerful. You get Night Eye, again, see in the dark essentially, for 90 seconds, and you get Invisibility for 180 seconds. It's a really, really powerful ability, especially for sneaking around. As well as getting a new ability at each stage, your passive abilities also go up at each stage, so you get a bit better on stats and resisting diseases and your resistance to normal weapon damage as well. Of course, there are penalties, as you'd expect, otherwise everyone would just be a vampire because you're just so much more powerful. If you get into the later stages of vampirism, people simply won't interact with you. Civilians will be scared of you, which obviously is very limiting in a game like Oblivion. You also have a weakness to fire damage, which will go up with the stages of vampirism, and by the end is actually quite crippling when you decide to go up against an enemy that does fire damage. And the really big one is the weakness to sunlight. So you take damage per second whilst you're out in the sun as a vampire. And if you get to stage 4, I believe you take 8 damage per second. So if you're out in the sun, especially at a low level, you're going to die really, really quickly at stage 4. It essentially limits you to doing your activities at night. That's the basics of it anyway. You can go and have a look on Google and see what the exact stats are for each level, etc. But I'm not going to bore you with it in this video. If you want to reverse vampirism, then there's one core way of doing that, and there's also one additional way if you have the Vile Lair DLC. The main way is to go to a guy called Raminus Paulus at the Arcane University. Make sure you feed first, because if you go at stage 4 vampirism, then he's not even going to speak to you. Just feed so you're back down to stage 1. Then you go and get a quest off him. This quest line gets you to prepare a potion that involves gathering garlic and stabbing some poor Argonian to get his blood. It takes a little bit of time, but yeah, it's fine. There is another way of doing it by using the Font of Renewal, but that's only possible if you have the Vile Lair DLC. Bear in mind, if you do decide to cure your vampirism, then there's only one way to get it back, and that's to do the Dark Brotherhood quest that I mentioned earlier. The other methods will actually stop working. Anyway, that's pretty much it.
Moving on from vampirism, in this next section I'm going to show you how to unlock all of the game's weird and wonderful followers.
We're going to cover all 6 of the permanent followers available in-game. All other followers are either temporary during a quest, single use and don't respawn, or they're actually summoning spells rather than actual followers, and therefore they're not listed in this video. The base game includes 3 different types of follower. Firstly, you have the Dark Brotherhood Murderers, who can be recruited to follow you once you've completed the Honour Thy Mother quest. This is actually the final quest in the Dark Brotherhood quest chain, and honestly this is one of the best and most fun storylines in the game, so it's worth doing even if you don't want the follower. To start the quest chain, you basically have to kill any innocent NPC in the game. If you want to be sure that you're not killing an NPC that's involved in another quest, then head to the Bravil Skooma Den and target one of the NPCs in there. Or for added satisfaction, you may want to follow the time-honoured tradition of creatively murdering the 3rd follower that I'm going to introduce you to in this video. If you know, you definitely know. Anyway, once you've completed the quest chain, you'll be able to recruit either an assassin, mage or archer to fight alongside you from the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary. All you need to do is approach them and simply ask them to follow you. The Mage Apprentice follower is acquired through very similar means. You have to complete a quest called Confront the King at the end of the Mages Guild quest chain. Much like the Dark Brotherhood, it's another fun quest line that's worth your time regardless of the ability to gain an additional follower. To join the Mages Guild, you're going to need to gain a recommendation from each of the Mages Guild halls. These halls can be found in the cities of Anvil, Bravil, Bruma, Shadenhull, Coral, Leowin and Skingrad, so basically all of the major cities outside of the Imperial City. You need to go and speak to the guild hall leaders in each of these cities, and they're going to offer you a recommendation after you've completed a task for them. Once you have all 8 recommendations, you can join the Mages Guild at the Arcane University in the Imperial City, and there you can continue the quest chain. Once you've completed the full quest line, you can recruit mage apprentices at the Arcane University, and as a bonus tip, you can actually get 2 mage apprentices to follow you. To do this, you're going to need to make sure that you recruit the black-haired Breton female first. For some reason, presumably a bug, you're still able to ask a 2nd apprentice to follow you whilst she's already following you. Anyway, moving on to the 3rd follower in the base game, and this one needs no introduction. He has achieved godlike meme status over the many years since Oblivion was released, and he might just be the most simultaneously loved and hated NPC in video game history. He is of course the Adoring Fan. You can gain him as a follower by completing the arena quest chain, which is actually really simple. You just need to travel to the arena in the Imperial City, you need to go down into the Bloodworks and speak to Owen, and then you just need to win all of your matches to become the Grand Champion. And for doing so, you'll gain the Adoring Fan as your loyal follower. And by Azura is he useless. He's annoying in the extreme, and he also runs away during combat. On the plus side, you can find lots of different creative ways to murder him, though I will warn you, he does respawn. Moving on to the free followers that you gain through DLC. Firstly, we have the Knights of the Nine, who can be recruited to follow you after you complete the Knights of the Nine quest chain. This quest chain can be started by travelling to Anvil and speaking to the seemingly crazy prophet who can be found across the road from the chapel. He'll set you off on a long and again very enjoyable quest chain that serves as the main content of the Knights of the Nine DLC. Once you complete it, you'll be able to ask any of the named knights at the Priory of the Nine to follow you. If the original knights die in combat, they'll be replaced by generic knights, though it is best to try and preserve the named knights because the generic ones that respawn in their place are actually weaker. If you have the Mage Tower DLC, you'll be able to summon creatures of flame, frost and storm known as Atronachs. To access the ability to summon Atronachs, you simply need to follow the quest that you'll receive after leaving the sewers, and that quest is going to tell you to travel to Frostcrag Spire. You then need to access the spire in order to claim it, and once you do, you'll be able to use the altar in the main room on the first floor to summon Atronachs to fight alongside you. You're going to need 3 of either fire, frost or void salts to perform the summoning ritual, and that depends on which element you want your follower to be attuned to. Again, the options are fire, frost and storm. It's actually a very similar story with the Fighter's Stronghold DLC. Once you've claimed the Fighter's Stronghold, which basically involves gaining a quest when you leave the sewers, travelling to the castle, defeating the attackers besieging it, and then speaking to the guard to claim the castle. However, you will then need to visit the market district in the Imperial City to speak to Nilthas Amalian. He sells an item called Battlehorn Barracks Upgrade. This will place some new NPCs in your castle, specifically a guy called Castellan Afon and 2 of his men-at-arms, who will then be found patrolling the castle, and you simply need to go up to them and speak to them if you want to recruit them as your follower. And that's all of them.
Now that you have every follower you could possibly ever need, you're going to need somewhere to house them. Luckily for you, Oblivion features a whole range of player houses, and next up I'm going to show you how to get every single one of them.
In total, there are 12 player houses available in-game, 8 of which can be purchased in the game, and 4 that are made available through DLC, all of which are included in the Game of the Year edition on Steam. So why bother with player housing at all? Well, on a basic level, houses offer safe and permanent storage for your items. As a general rule, the bigger the house, the more storage is going to be available. Another basic utility offered by player housing is the ability to sleep safely, though to be fair there are a number of places you can do that without buying a house. The DLC houses, however, offer some far more interesting benefits that actually impact gameplay. In this guide, we're going to first cover the 8 base game houses in price order, cheapest to most expensive, and then move on to the 4 DLC houses. Please note that I've timestamped the video to allow you to skip to any particular player house that you might be interested in. So the cheapest player house is a little difficult to get too excited about. It's literally a wooden shack that you can find in the waterfront district of the Imperial City. I'll show it here on the map. It's not much, but you could call it home for the low price of 2,000 gold. It can be purchased from Vinicia Melisea, providing you have a deposition of 50 or more with her, and she can be found at the Office of Imperial Commerce within the Market District of the Imperial City. Now you may have noticed there that I mentioned disposition, and this is actually a theme for every player house aside from the Anvil house and the DLC houses. If your disposition is too low, then you can improve your disposition with any NPC by using the persuasion wheel, bribing the individual with money, or simply increasing your fame by completing various quests in the game, for example the main story, as well as for closing Oblivion gates. When you first acquire the house, it won't have any furnishings, and this is pretty much the case for all of the houses in game. So to purchase upgrades, you can visit Sergius Vress, who can be found at Three Brothers Trade Goods within the Market District of the Imperial City. To fully upgrade your shack, it'll cost you a further 2,000 gold. You'll know if you've bought all available upgrades as you get a quest pop up confirming that. On to the Anvil house, which is actually slightly different to the other base game houses. This house is called Benirus Manor, and it can be found to the east of Anvil. You can purchase the house for 5,000 gold from Velwyn Benirus at the Count's Arms in the same city. However, in this case, to upgrade the house you actually need to complete a quest called Where Spirits Have Lease. Basically, Velwyn has sold you a haunted house, and you need to clear out the ghosts before you can fully furnish it. To trigger the ghost attack, you basically have to go and sleep at the manor. Then you simply have to complete the quest. Now remember, ghosts are actually immune to physical damage in Oblivion, so you're going to need to use silver weapons, spells, or similar to defeat them. Now the positive news about your haunted house is that the furnishings are free and automatically applied as soon as you complete the quest. It actually makes this a really good first house because you get a lot for your money. Moving on to the Bravil house, which can be purchased from Count Regulus Torrentius, who you can find in the Great Hall of Bravil Castle. The house will cost you a grand total of 4,000 gold, and you'll need a disposition of 50 plus to enable the purchase. One potentially useful thing to mention here is that NPCs have routines in Oblivion, including sleeping. So if you can't find a particular NPC, then just use the wait function to pass the hours until they show up at the locations that I show you in this video. Anyway, once the house is yours, you can purchase upgrades from Nilawen at the fair deal in Bravil. All of the upgrades will cost you a grand total of 3,900 gold. In the city of Leowin, you can purchase a house for 7,000 coins from Count Marius Caro, providing you have a disposition of 60 plus. He can be found at Castle Leowin County Hall. Of course, once you buy the house, you're going to need to get upgrades, and you can get them from a guy called Gundulus. Gundulus can be found at Best Goods in Leowin, and he'll charge you 7,000 gold for the full suite of upgrades. As you can see, the whole real estate business in Oblivion is starting to get pretty expensive. Moving on to Bruma, where you can purchase a house for 10,000 of your shiny gold coins. You can get this from Countess Narina Carvane, who can be found in the Lord's Manor inside Castle Bruma. You'll need a disposition of 60 plus, and she's going to direct you to someone called Suratan in order to purchase your upgrades. You can find Suratan at Nova Roma in Bruma, and he's going to charge you 9,900 gold if you want all of the upgrades on offer. Next up is Shadenhull, where you can purchase a house for 15,000 gold from Count Andel in Daris, who can be found at the County Hall within Castle Shadenhull. You're going to need a disposition of 60 plus to make the purchase, and after you do, upgrades are available from Borba Graz Azgash at Borba's Goods and Stores in Shadenhull. To get all of the upgrades, it's going to cost you another 15,000 gold. The next property can be found in Coral, and comes at a pretty substantial premium of 20,000 gold from Countess Ariana Valga. Valga can be found at the Castle Chorrol Great Hall. You're going to need a disposition of 70 plus with the Countess, and you're also going to need a fame level of 12 or above. As mentioned previously, fame comes from completing the main quest, guild quests, and closing Oblivion gates, among other things, basically just playing the game. Upgrades for the house are going to cost you a further 19,400 gold from Seed Neas, who can be found at Northern Goods and Trade in Chorrol. The final house included in the base game can be found in Skingrad, and it's definitely the biggest and fanciest of them all. It can be purchased from Shung Gro Yarag for 25,000 gold at Castle Skingrad. It requires a disposition of 70 plus and a fame level of 15 or more. If you skip this timestamp, then go back to the Chorrol timestamp for a brief explanation of fame. Upgrades for the Skingrad house can be purchased from Gundar at Colovian Traders in Skingrad. And unlike in the other houses, you can actually acquire a maid as well to look after it. To do so, you simply need to speak to Asia at Colovian Traders, and providing you've purchased the servants' quarters from Gundar, you can hire her for 150 gold to work as your maid. She can basically provide you with food and drink consumables that offer a number of benefits. On to the DLC houses, starting with Dunbarrow Cove. The first thing to note is that there's no purchase price for this house, and unlike the houses in the base game, it offers additional benefits beyond simple storage and a place to sleep. The Cove provides a new vendor, a new skill trainer, an unlockable lockbox to train your security skill, a fence who will allow you to vendor stolen goods, and it will also give you the ability to recruit pirates to fight alongside you. If you have the DLC, which you probably do, as I assume most people are probably playing Game of the Year edition or similar, obviously check the version you bought if you're unsure, at the end of the sewers you're going to receive a quest. You'll then need to travel to this location on the map and clear out the skeletons in order to take ownership of the home. You'll be provided with instructions as to how to upgrade it, but to save you the time, you simply need to go to the Sea Tub Clarabella within the Anvil docks and purchase them all from Dahlia Rackham, which can usually be found inside the ship. All of the upgrades are going to cost you a grand total of 5,500 gold. Next up is Frostcrag Spire. Again, there's no purchase price, you just have to have the DLC installed. The house provides the ability to grow plants, portal to all the mages guilds and the Arcane University in the Imperial City. It gives you an altar that allows you to summon creatures from Oblivion to fight alongside you, as well as enchanting and spell-making stations. Once again, you'll be given a quest before you exit the sewers, and you'll need to travel to this location on the map and simply enter the spire to claim it. You'll notice a book to loot as soon as you enter, and this will tell you to see Aurelian Way at the Mystic Emporium within the market district of the Imperial City. That's where you're going to be able to purchase your upgrades. All in all, the upgrades are going to cost you 8,500 of your shiniest gold coins, and it's also worth mentioning that unlike the other houses we've mentioned so far, there are two upgrades that are slightly different to the others. So far you'll notice you've been purchasing basically books or scrolls, whereas for Frostcrag Spire there are also two candle holder upgrades that I'm showing on the screen right now, just in case you missed them like I did the first time round. Again, you'll know you've got everything if the quest prompt appears on the screen. The third DLC house is Battlehorn Castle, and again it's free with the DLC. Battlehorn Castle provides you with servants to produce food, drink and ability enhancing wines, a buff that improves your armourer skill, a trainer for sparring practice, and the ability to produce hunting trophies. Again, you'll receive the quest at the end of the sewers, and you'll need to travel to this location on the map and defeat the enemies besieging the castle. Once you've done that, speak to the guard in order to claim the castle as your own. To upgrade the castle, you're going to need to travel to the Merchant's Inn within the market district of the Imperial City, and speak to a guy called Nilfas Armalian. The upgrades are going to cost you a pretty steep 15,000 gold. Finally, you have Deepscorn Hollow, and as with all the other houses, it's free with the relevant DLC. Deepscorn Hollow allows you to recruit a minion who can both make you gold and fight alongside you, grow poisonous plants, access a number of useful fonts and shrines, including one that cures vampirism, and even allows you to keep a prisoner to feed on if you're playing as a vampire. As you're probably expecting by now, you'll receive a quest on leaving the sewers, and you'll need to travel to this location on the map, dive underwater to the entrance, and claim your beautiful, dark, dingy vampiric lair. Upgrades can be purchased at the Warnet Inn, just to the west of the Imperial City, from a chap called Rowley Erdwolf, and this all comes in at the bargain price of 15,250 gold. It's worth noting that much like Frostcrag Spire, there is one slightly different item to purchase. It's a type of ichor, and it's quite easy to miss, so I'm showing it on screen right now. And that's it. Hopefully you're now aware of all available player houses in the game, and if you're rich, you might even be able to afford to purchase some of them.
Finally, it's worth knowing that Oblivion has a number of major and minor DLCs, all of which come as standard with the remaster, whichever version you bought, and in the final section of this video I'm going to show you how to start each and every one of them.
In total, there are 10 DLCs available. You have the famous horse armor, 4 different houses, the Wizard's Tower, the Thieves' Den, the Vile Lair, and the Fighter's Stronghold, 2 minor DLC content, the Orrery and Spell Tomes, and then you have 3 more substantial DLCs. In order of smallest to most significant, you have the Mehrunes Razor Dungeon, the Knights of the Nine quest line, and of course the famous Shivering Isles expansion. Let's start with the horse armor, which is basically just a skin for your horse that also increases the horse's overall hit points. Now this is actually quite useful as enemies do target your horse in Oblivion and they can quite easily kill it. How do you get it? Well, it's about as simple as it gets. Towards the end of the sewers, basically the game's tutorial, you'll be given a quest. In fact, most of the DLC quests are either given towards the end of the sewers or immediately after you leave, with 2 exceptions. Once you have the quest, you're going to need to travel to Chestnut Handy Stables just outside of the Imperial City, and you're going to need to speak to this orc. It's worth noting that many fast travel locations, primarily cities, are already unlocked at the beginning of the game in Oblivion, so always check if you have fast travel unlocked before running somewhere. Now at first, when you ask her for horse armor and a horse, she says, "You've got to be kidding," which is fair enough really. But if you then tell her that you're not fussy on the type of horse you get, then she'll offer you both a basic horse and the armor for free. Job done. Moving on to houses and starting with the Wizard's Tower, also known as Frostcrag Spire. This is an elaborate player house that offers players features such as a botanical garden that produces over 100 different plants, in fact including those that only spawn within the Oblivion gates, as well as portals to all mage guilds and the Arcane University in the Imperial City. Not only this, but the tower also contains an altar that allows you to summon creatures from Oblivion to fight alongside you, as well as enchanting and spellmaking stations. You get the quest at the end of the sewers, and you simply need to travel to this location on your map, enter the building, and read the book near the door. This book will provide you with instructions on how to upgrade the tower and to unlock all of its features, which basically just involves visiting a vendor and spending some money, and that's actually the same for all of the other DLC player houses. Next up is the Thieves' Den, known as Dunbarrow Cove. The Cove provides a new vendor offering thief-based items, and a new trainer providing skill upgrades, also of the sneaky thief persuasion. It also provides access to an unlockable lockbox to train your security skill on, and a fence who will allow you to vendor stolen items. On top of this, the Thieves' Den also allows you to recruit pirates to fight alongside you. As with the previous house, the quest is given at the end of the sewers. You need to travel to this location on the map, dive down into the wreckage, clear out the skeletons guarding the den. Note that there's one in the ship's cabin and one in the corridors, as well as the more obvious ones patrolling the main area, and then the house is yours. Again, a book with instructions on how to upgrade the tower and unlock the listed benefits is provided. The third player house DLC is the Vile Lair, also known as Deep Scorn Hollow. This house offers the ability to recruit a minion who can both make you gold and fight alongside you. It also allows you to grow poisonous plants, as well as access a number of fonts and shrines that allow players to do things such as be cured of vampirism, or give them the ability to heal and cure diseases even when at a high level of infamy. And finally, the lair also offers vampires the ability to keep a prisoner to feed on, which is pretty dark. The quest is provided, you guessed it, at the end of the sewers. Just travel to this location on the map and access the lair to claim it. Once again, you'll receive instructions as to how you can upgrade this player house and unlock each of the benefits we've just listed. And again, it's just a case of visiting a vendor and buying some upgrades. The final player house in base DLC is the Fighter's Stronghold, otherwise known as Battlehorn Castle. The Fighter's Stronghold offers players the ability to unlock servants who can provide you with food, drink, and ability enhancing wines. It also provides a buff to improve your armourer skill, a trainer for sparring practice, and the ability to produce hunting trophies. You pick up the quest for the Fighter's Stronghold at the end of the sewers, just like the other DLC housing quests, but in this case you do actually have to do something to unlock it, a bit like Dunbarrow Cove. It's very simple though. Travel to this location on the map and defeat the enemies who are besieging the castle. Once you've done this, you just need to speak to the guard and you'll be awarded the castle. Probably the easiest way anyone's ever been awarded an entire castle in history. And of course, you'll get some instructions on how to upgrade it using a new vendor in the Imperial City. Next up, we have the Orrery DLC, which is basically a short quest line that unlocks the Orrery within the Arcane University. This allows you to obtain a buff to an attribute, but you have to do this at the cost of taking a debuff to a different attribute. Which buff you get is based on the moon cycle in the game. Now, to unlock this feature, you'll first receive a quest after leaving the sewers, surprise surprise, and this quest will lead you to a bandit camp that I'm showing on the map right now. Defeat the bandit here and loot the note on their body. This will then unlock 4 further bandit camps, again showing that on the map now. You'll need to go to each of these camps, defeat the bandits, and most importantly, and I forgot to do this when filming this video even though I've done it before, loot the dwarven items that they are carrying. If you don't loot these, you won't be able to complete the quest. You then need to head back to the Arcane University, marked on the map, and speak to Bovial in order to complete the quest. Now, regardless of her saying, "Here is your reward," you will actually need to wait 24 hours before you can gain access to the Orrery. I don't even know if I'm saying that right, but whatever. After waiting 24 hours, you'll get a quest update that's going to prompt you that you're able to access the Orrery through this door. Job done. The next DLC is Spell Tomes, and it's the simplest of all. Basically, this DLC adds spell tomes to the world that will be teaching you, well, spells, big surprise. You don't need to do anything special to get them. There's something like a 25% chance that they're going to appear instead of a scroll, and you're just going to randomly find them in the world. Barely worth mentioning, but it technically is DLC content, and I did call this a complete guide. Now onto the 3 most exciting DLCs, at least in my opinion. Firstly, you have Mehrunes Razor. This adds a quest to the game that takes you into the depths of a new dungeon in search of a powerful Daedric artifact, known as Mehrunes Razor. This is one of the biggest dungeons, in fact I think it might be the biggest dungeon in the game, and as well as the artifact itself, it offers a new armor set, weapons, a new spell, and various other items. Once again, you get this quest at the end of the sewers, and then you'll have to make a long trek east from Bravil, unless you already have some other fast travel locations unlocked. And once you get there, you're going to need to go into the castle ruins and enter the dungeon. Now, I want to avoid spoilers for this one as it does have a story component, so I won't say any more on the quest itself, aside from letting you know to loot the bag next to the door, as the diary in that bag is required to progress the quest. And I don't think you actually get the option to open the door if you don't do it. But I'll leave the rest for you to uncover for yourself. Next up is the Knights of the Nine DLC, which introduces an expansive new quest chain in which you seek out the lost relics of the Divine Crusader. This is the second largest DLC for Oblivion and includes new locations, enemies, weapons, armor, including a very cool Crusader set actually, and a bunch of new magic among other things. To start the expansion, you need to travel to Anvil and speak to this crazy preacher guy. Ask him about the chapel attack, and then be sure to say, "No, I have no claim to fame," in order to progress the dialogue to the point that he'll actually give you the pilgrimage quest. If you brag about your accomplishments, he won't offer you the quest and you'll have to restart the dialogue. It's also worth noting that you cannot start the quest if you've become infamous, so you'll have to clear your infamy first. Along with the quest, he'll give you a map that shows you the locations of the different shrines that you need to visit to complete the first part of the quest. Again, no spoilers, the rest is for you to discover. And finally, we have the most significant DLC, the only one considered to be a true expansion, the Shivering Isles. The Shivering Isles expansion sees players enter the realm of Sheogorath to assist him in protecting his plane of oblivion from the Grey March. Again, I won't give any spoilers, but if you've enjoyed the base game, it's definitely worth your time. It's a really good expansion. The Shivering Isles unlocks a whole new zone, dungeons, new factions, enemies, items, lore, achievements, and just about everything else. To start the expansion, you need to exit the sewers at the beginning of the game and then wait 24 to 48 hours for the quest to appear. Once you have the quest, you'll need to travel to this island outside Bravil. I believe you can actually force the quest by travelling to this island if you've not received it in the conventional way, but either way, once you arrive on the island, you're going to need to defeat the crazy individual who exits the portal, or just let the guard do it for you. Then you're going to let some dialogue play out that eventually offers you to enter the portal. And that's it.
Now, if you made it this far through the video, then I'm both surprised and impressed, and hopefully you know a shed load more about Oblivion than you did at the beginning. Of course, there's plenty more to learn, and I do of course have many more RPG guides on my channel that will help you to do just that. So maybe consider subscribing, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.